What is the dumbest rule your school ever had? The frames on your glasses could only be black, otherwise you'd be sent home or have to spend the day without glasses. Any idea why? Or was it just an "it is what it is" rule? Yeah, the principal would just introduce stupid rules that he thought would bring discipline to the school or some crap like that. Back when cell phones weren't really what they are now, if you got caught with it, the principal would take it for the rest of the semester. Well, sure enough, I got my phone confiscated and my mom went in there raising hell. She told them they don't pay the cell phone bill and that holding it for months was basically theft. They ended up changing the rule after that. I honestly don't know what they were thinking. My high school tried that crap. They changed it so that you paid $15 and had to get your parents or their permission to get it back. I got mine taken when it vibrated and the sub heard it. I didn't have it out. She never saw it. She was standing right by me and heard it. I was 18, so I didn't need my mom to come get it for me. I told them I wasn't paying to get something that is already mine and they can't charge us for it. They stopped charging kids to get it back, especially after people found out the people/teachers in the office were going through kids' phones. You should have taped a bunch of pubes all over it, so if they confiscate it, they'll get pubes on their hands. Around the time Pink Floyd's The Wall came out, students were forbidden from playing Another Brick in the Wall Part 2 on the school grounds. Students got a letter to give their parents from the school superintendent. He felt the lyrics, "We don't need no education," and "Hey, teacher, leave those kids alone," were revolutionist, and anybody playing the song was considered a dissident by the school superintendent. This is what 4th, 5th, and 6th graders were talking about here. Parents had a field day, citing all sorts of free speech violations. Superintendent was fired at the end of the school year. That song is about the only thing I remember from 4th grade. If you were late to school at all, you need your parent to sign you into school. And obviously, anyone with 2 working parents would see this as the idea that if you're even a few seconds late, you have to ditch completely. Can confirm. I've had to sneak into school more than a few times from the senior parking between classes, or I got detention. We had that rule as well. Only problem was once school was in session, the only way in was one entrance with a security cage built in, and you had to get buzzed in to the building. No sneaking in at that point. In the 6th grade, 2 girls were caught arguing with each other in the bathroom. They were literally just arguing about which Backstreet Boy was hotter or something. So the logical course of action was for the school to ban all arguing. And if you got caught disagreeing with another student, it was an automatic detention. I still can't wrap my head around it. We wore uniforms that were ordered from a magazine provided by the school. If our uniform skirts looked to be too short, they were measured with a ruler. Thin girls who wore a smaller size had slightly shorter skirts than everyone else, so we were constantly being sent to the principal's office for wearing the uniforms they required us to wear. I remember this. Summer uniform skirts must be knee length. Winter uniform skirts must be ankle length. The only problem was that a skirt that was knee length at the start of the summer could be too short by the end of the summer if the person it belonged to grew, which people tend to do a lot of in school. I wasn't allowed to wear a yellow raincoat because it reminded people of Columbine. It reminded me of Paddington Bear. During middle school, the locker room lockers weren't allowed to be used because some students leave food in there. Surprise, surprise, a lot of people got their crap stolen and the administration didn't care. The school did nothing about it until a PE teacher got his iPod stolen. Then they started having people monitor the locker room occasionally, but theft still occurred. I didn't expect it to happen to me. What if he pretended it was stolen so that they would do something? When I was in high school, one of my classmates was diagnosed with cancer. As a form of fundraising to help his family, some students and parents organized a t-shirt sale at the school where all the proceeds went to his family. Pretty much everyone ordered one, and the day they came in, we all put them on over our usual uniform shirts. Later that day, the principal came on the PA to say we all had to take the shirts off because visitors were coming to the school and he didn't want them to think we had substandard uniform regulations. For a school that preaches family, I thought it was completely ridiculous and kind of insulting. In elementary school, a friend of mine sold bracelets to raise money for charity. The principal found out and confiscated the $50 in cash that he had raised, citing something in the student handbook. I asked to see the handbook since we were never given one. She got angry, left, and came back after a little bit with a single sheet of paper that had typed on it, "Students are not allowed to sell things on school grounds." It was ridiculous. Why do such bitter people become teachers? We had to sign out to go to the bathroom, but if we were signed out over 3 times a quarter, 9 weeks, We would get a grade deduction. What? Did they expect you to piss your pants instead? Nah, the 30 seconds they give you between classes is plenty of time. Our school had a uniform with a shirt as part of it. One year, they switched the color to white shirts from navy, but because they had a cheap supplier, they were pretty see-through. As a result, every female student's bra was visible. Instead of acknowledging their mistake and changing the color back, or just switching to a uniform manufacturer that didn't use fabric as thin as tissue paper, they implemented a bunch of rules about what color underwear girls were allowed to wear. It was only for girls, too. A boy with a blue undershirt was fine, but a girl with a blue bra, heavens no. Everyone thought it was stupid, including many parents, but the official line was, if you wore tasteful clothes, this wouldn't be an issue. Having a rule that forces male teachers to comment on the bras of girls as young as 13 is pretty messed up, in my opinion. Especially when many of these children didn't even get to buy their own clothes, but relied on their parents. My Catholic school, kindergarten through the 8th grade, required everyone to wear a white button-up shirt. I guess white blouses in the 90s were pretty thin though, because the principal made the religion teacher gather all the girls together to tell us that we needed to wear more tasteful bras. After that, the principal made our religion teacher once again gather all the girls to tell us to make sure our undershirts, that we used to cover up our wanton, tasteless 7th grade bras, didn't have any kind of pattern on them. How about you just stop creeping on little kids, gross principal? Not a Catholic school, but we also got lectures about wearing nude bras under our white shirts. It was so unsettling. It was an all-girls school. I think we were all aware that we had breasts. We don't need to panic over it. You could only wear short-sleeved polos, no long ones. It lasted a day since it was around winter. In my primary school, the younger half of the school had to wear shorts and white polos all year long with no exceptions. The older half had to wear button-up shirts all year and got the choice of wearing long trousers in winter. I lived in the South, and at our middle/high school, we had to wear long pants and had a tucked-in polo-style shirt. It was horrid on the 110-degree days with 100% humidity. No reading during lunch. Lunch is for friends so that you can talk during lunch and not in class. We would have to take books away from students who were reading. It was awful for loner kids. Anything that was not a meal was banned from lunch. Students who brought a pencil, their phone, a binder, or anything else had to give it to the teacher. The rule was repealed after one day when we called them communists trying to limit our freedom. They were sick of people shouting, "Better dead than red," in the halls. No socks with logos on them because they could distract other people's learning environments. Did your classmates spend a lot of time investigating the socks of others? Ironically, the rule made everybody start checking out each other's socks. You had 2 minutes to get from one class to the next. Sounds good on paper until you realize we had one-way halls only, and if your next class was on the other side of the school, you were pretty much screwed. If you were late to class, you had to go to detention for the entire period. What made this rule more stupid was that you couldn't take your backpack into class, so you had to put it in your locker. So between each class, you had to put your books away and get your other books for the next class, eating up your time to get to the next class. Eventually, the school got rid of the time rule and the backpack rule when they realized how stupid it was. My school had a 5-minute moving time between lessons when I was in year 7, but in year 8 we moved into a new site for some reason, and they decided to get rid of moving times. This meant that you had 0 minutes to move between classrooms, but there were 5 school buildings, humanities, design, science, PE, and drama/dance, etc. Subjects 3 out of the 5 buildings having 3 floors. It took about 5 minutes to move between rooms depending on where your next class was, eating up a lesson time. Thankfully, they didn't give us detention or anything if we did turn up late. We had a 5-minute moving period, but half the teachers took it as, "Let's keep the lesson going for 5 more minutes" rule. You would often end up late to stuff. Then again, the worst one was the class I took that didn't seem to have a set room. When I went to the 6th form, this got worse. We had some classes in a completely separate building. The building was a good 3 to 5 minutes from the exit to the entrance of the actual 6th form. This got worse when you realized that one of the classes was on the 3rd floor of an offset stairwell in the back, constantly late from that building. I taught at a school where students couldn't be in the hallways during lunch for any reason at all. During my last week there, my students wanted to throw me a going-away party in my classroom during lunch. I told them it wasn't necessary, but they insisted, which I thought was a nice gesture. About 5 minutes into lunch, no students had stopped by, and when I went into the hallway, they were standing there in front of another teacher who was telling them they couldn't go to my room. When I politely approached my colleague and explained the situation, she tried to stand steadfast and tell me no. Even after I told her they had permission and they'd be under my supervision the entire time, she still said no. Finally, knowing it was my last week, I told my students to go to my room anyway because I wasn't having this crap, and it wasn't fair to my students who'd spent a lot of money on a cake. My colleague went and told our boss, who pretty much just ignored her. Guess who's not getting a cake when she leaves? Funny thing was that she was retiring. The school had a shindig for her, but not one student gave her anything. They tried to make the halls and stairways one way. It lasted maybe a year. We have a one-way corridor at my school. It doesn't work at all. I went to a school with really thin corridors, so they were all one way. One day there was a leak in the ceiling, so they had to block off an entire section and make one of them two-way. Chaos ensued. Kids were literally running face first into each other and falling, causing kids behind them to trip, causing a massive pileup. I was unlucky enough to get caught in the middle of one and almost got crushed under a wall of students. It was kinda terrifying, but at the same time pretty hilarious watching all the robots try to function without their instructions. I don't miss that school. My elementary school took the safety first rule to mean that anything where someone got hurt became banned. This meant that any popular game inevitably got banned after a few days. After conventional games like basketball, soccer, tag, etc. got banned, we were left with safe games. Then they banned yo-yos after a kid got hit with one, invisible sword fights, and jump ropes. Once they banned all physical activities, things started to be banned for causing emotional harm. Trading card games like Magic, Pokemon, slumber party games like Mafia and Detective. It became a game in itself to see how quickly you could get something banned. They wondered why kids couldn't pay attention in class. Zero tolerance. Any fight or schoolyard scuffle resulted in both parties being suspended regardless of the circumstance. One kid could walk up to another kid and punch him in the face without warning or explanation, and both get suspended. Brilliant. My dad actually told me to fight back as hard as I wanted after I told him my friend got suspended for something like that. If you're getting suspended regardless of who's at fault, punch the guy in his face. You'll still be in trouble, but at least you'll give as good as you get for it. Good old zero tolerance. It's why I still fly into a full-on rage whenever something small happens, still trying to get bang for my buck. Not a permanent rule, but we had dress-up days for homecoming. In my area, at least, Thursday was always Toga Day for the seniors. So we had Toga Day, and all the seniors were sitting in the first period when an administrator came in. He told us we had to change because we were showing our shoulders. They approved Toga Day. Do they not know what togas are? It's these lessons that really prepare you for the American workplace, run by these same types of dumbasses. At my school, you need to have a signed doctor's note to bring a water bottle to school. You can get suspended for bringing it. Would you even have to be a doctor to say that water is essential to human survival? Hey, water is for the weak. I don't drink water, and I don't feel any negative side effects. To be honest, I don't feel anything at all. I went to a private high school that had a ton of stupid rules. In the driving section, it stated that students were not permitted to park their vehicles on top of the school buildings. The only way you could get anything on those roofs was with a crane. My favorite rule was no running on school grounds, including sports fields. The rule was removed after students realized that it would be breaking the rules to play any sport above walking pace. And hilarity ensued as prefects started handing out detentions at the finishing line at our annual school Olympics. That first rule is directed at the rich kid and his private helicopter. Didn't this happen at MIT once? They disassembled the car and took the parts up the stairwell and then reassembled them on the roof? We had a rule in our dining hall where you weren't allowed to move seats again after you'd sat down at the first one. To this day, I have no idea why, but it was official and clearly written down. Not too rigorously enforced, mind you. Also, they briefly banned talking at my junior school's dining hall. For a 6-year-old, this was genuinely very oppressive, keeping in mind how much stricter and more aggressive teaching practices were in the early 1990s. It's also worth noting that many of my teachers at that time were middle-aged or nearing retirement. Hence, they had their teaching heyday in the 1960s and 1970s, when you could be shot for not doing your homework. Some parents complained, and the ban was lifted. In elementary school, if the kids in the cafeteria talked louder than a whisper, the school would go nuts and ban us from talking altogether. We had a lot of silent lunches. Who expects preschoolers and 5th graders to whisper at lunch? The lunch ladies weren't required to wear hairnets because they had some sort of spray-on replacement that was supposedly effective at doing the same thing. Eventually, we all got tired of picking hair out of our food, so a group of kids decided to boycott the school lunches by packing 300 paper bag lunches and handing them out to whoever wanted them. That day, there were only around 10 people who ate the school lunch, and most of them were special needs students who were forced to, by their supervisors, to not participate. So a few hours after lunch, we all got called into an assembly where they began lecturing us about how rude we were to the lunch ladies. Apparently, we'd hurt their feelings because we didn't want to eat their food. Thus, a new rule was born. You aren't allowed to eat a lunch that someone else brought to the school for you. They claimed it was not only rude of us to boycott the school's lunches, but it was also a safety risk. Some of the lunches contained peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, but there was a cluster of peanut allergy lunches available that day as well. Clearly, the students should have then organized picking up lunches outside of the school during the morning so that people technically brought their own lunches to the school. Or just went on a hunger strike. Eat a giant breakfast and then push through lunch until you get out. At my elementary school during lunchtime, we had 5 minutes of silence. After everyone sat down to eat, the teachers would call 5 minutes of silence, and if as much as noisily crunched on a cracker, they sent you to detention. You can imagine how hard this is for 1st through 5th graders. I transferred to a new school back when I was probably in the 3rd grade. They also had a 5-minute of silence rule too, but they never explained it to me when I got there. The teachers would ring bells and the kids would just get very quiet. Anyways, the first day of school, they rang the bell and I asked all of the kids what was going on. Bam! Instant detention. It's their legal way to try to do a prayer break, really. In the school I attend, if you are even 1 minute late, you get office detention, and every day there are like 100 to 200 people in it. In my 7th grade, if you were even slightly late for class, you had to go to the office to get a late slip, which is a half-hour process that makes you miss most of the lecture. That's basically my school in a nutshell. People hate being late and getting detention because of that, and actually just go home instead of facing the consequences. If you go home, you are marked as absent, so nothing happens. You can only write with one hand. Doesn't matter which one is left or right, but it can only be one. If you are ambidextrous and write with both hands, that was against the school rules. You had to pick a hand, and the hand that you didn't pick would be tied to the chair for the rest of the day. Oh, you can only use scissors with the hand that is tied down? Too bad. This sounds like something that would happen in the 1950s, except this was 1995 in the UK. I had to sign in and out of a logbook to use the bathroom. Supposedly, it was to prevent vandalism and graffiti. It didn't work. Same at my old school. Nobody checked, so edgy 14-year-old me just drew a huge cock every once in a while, since the book was behind the teacher. After reports of older kids hogging the swing sets, my elementary school's principal implemented a plan to ensure complete fairness. In order to use the swings, students would be required to fill in a sign-up sheet in advance and wait to be assigned a 15-minute swinging time slot. Students were issued colored pennies during their time slot, so that noon-hour supervisors could enforce the rule. My elementary with swing sets was dealt with by the kids. I have no idea where the rule originated, but it was well in place when I arrived, at grade 3. If you arrived at the swing set and all the swings were in use, you picked which one you wanted and stood to the side of it, watching the swinger. While doing so, you counted slowly, too quickly, and you were made to redo it, to 100. At 100, the other swinger would hop off and you could have your turn until someone else counted you off. Guys with long hair had to have their hair up in a ponytail at all times. Girls could have their hair in whatever way they wanted. Most of the teachers would let this slide, but my art teacher in early high school, when I forgot my hair tie, they forced me to sit holding my hair in a ponytail with my left hand while drawing with my right. This may be stereotyping a bit, but of all the teachers to not allow leeway on some expression of self or individualism kind of grounds, I did not expect the one that teaches art, the thing often about or including expression of self or individualism, to enforce that rule. Some art teachers are artisans, not artists. They know the skills of art, but the ethos thoroughly escapes them. My high school banned sporks. I created this game where everyone buys a spork for $2, and you eliminate other players by stabbing them when they don't have their spork on hand. Last man standing wins all the money. What I didn't expect was how many people wanted to play and how committed everybody was going to be. I ended up with close to $250 and a 3-week of battle royale in the halls, at home, and at sporting events everywhere. I was sent to the principal's office being accused of starting a gambling ring and creating the biggest distraction the principal had ever seen in his 30 years of education, blah blah blah. The school banned sporks pretty soon after. Good times. You're a goddamn hero. I mean, I would have hated you with a passion because of the people who would stab me regardless, but a hero anyway. You had to ask to go to the bathroom, which is fine unless you have a pinhead teacher, but then you had to ask separate permission from the student office thing to use toilet rolls, which they gave you a set amount of squares for. I genuinely never understood the point of that one. Also, my school had a rule where you were only allowed to have natural eye colors. Not natural makeup, natural iris color. I'm taking a guess that it was more about embarrassment than anything. For instance, if a student would rather take a 30-minute crap every day or just sit on the toilet to get out of class, they'd have to suffer the embarrassment for it. I knew kids who faked bowel trouble on a regular basis because they'd rather go hang out in the bathroom than sit in class. The thing that gets me about this is that if students would rather publicly claim bowel troubles in front of a class of other kids and go hang out in a nasty school bathroom, why do none of these administrators ever assume that just maybe the teacher isn't doing a good job of inspiring children and creating a good learning environment? Why do students always get reprimanded when it's clear that it's come to a point where they'd literally rather do anything else under the sun than stay in class? I'm not saying everyone with the proper conditions to learn is going to be front row teacher's pet material, but school bathrooms are some serious last resort crap. You were not allowed to go to the school library during your lunch break unless you had a pass from a teacher. This was because the city planners decided that the school library for the newly built high school would double as a public library. So there were exits directly out into the parking lot, which meant kids could go in the library and then go out of the library exit to skip classes. I even had library personnel hassle me when I visited the library a year or two after graduation, because I still looked young enough to be a student there. Reminds me of a school down here in North Carolina. I didn't go to the school, but security was called when I refused to listen to any of the staff to go back to class or tell them my name. Eventually, I just threw out the name Ben Dover and left. Reminds me of something that happened to me. In my town, high schools got out at 1 p.m., middle schools got out at 2, and elementary schools at 3 p.m. I was in high school, and after class I went home, changed, and went for a jog. My run took me past my old middle school, at which a hall monitor was standing in the parking lot. I was on the opposite side of the street, so not on school property or anything, and she yelled at me to go back in class. I ignored her because I was on my own time and did not owe this woman an explanation, and she got in her golf cart and chased me down. I explained that I no longer went to this school and no, I would not go with her to the office to call my parents. She then tried to nab me for dress code, at which I continued to say that I did not have to follow because I was on my own time. She asked to see my high school ID, which I did not have on me because I had no reason to. Finally, I just walked away, to which she screamed at me, "You can't hide your immodest clothing from your parents forever!" Thanks for watching until the end. If you have a story to share, please do so in the comments below. Then be sure to like this video, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so that you know when our next video is available. For more videos like this one, please stop by our channel. Thanks again, and see you next time.